He that is proud eats up himself. Pride is his own glass, his own trumpet, his own chronicle. The sharp ring of a bell stirred me from my sleep I had managed to get. Whatever the doctor gave me yesterday was starting to wear off, and every time I moved, I hurt. I bled from the long lines that I'd been opened up at, and I worried about the quality of the stitching. I tried not to think about it when I had to keep the hope up of escaping, even with as unlikely as that was. The doors across the entire cell block clanged and rattled open together. Slowly, a pair of prisoners from each cell stepped out and lined up in the center. Cheap Shot proceeded out of his cell and took his place, not even giving a look back to me. Slowly, I pushed myself up to my hooves. I couldn't move faster than what felt like a step a minute, or I'd scream. "You, prisoner!" The abomination that had been patrolling the block shouted. I looked up to him as I stopped. I'd only seen about halfway, and as far as I could tell, I was supposed to move faster. The guard who'd shouted was a pony with the Minotaur's head, the same one I'd seen yesterday. "Fall in line, or I'll ship you off to the showers." He snorted and tilted his head down. The horns he had looked dangerous on their own, but had been capped with rusty metal so they looked even more imposing. I nodded and tried my best to place myself next to Cheap Shot. If I wanted to stay alive, I'd have to do as I was told. Adapting and blending in was the only way I could get the plan to break out. Cheap Shot looked to me with a look of concern before he leaned his head down and nudged my leg. Carefully, I lifted it and hung it around his neck. The extra leverage pulled at my stitches, but overall I'd felt better in this position. "Go," the abomination ordered. The sound of steady hoofbeats on the concrete preempted the prisoner train moving forward. The other prisoners knew this march well, while I didn't even know where we were going. As we approached the abomination, he had a metal pipe in his fetlock, and lowered it so that it cut us from the train. We stopped as the other prisoners ahead continued through the doorways. "No physical contact." He glared at me as his nostrils flared. "Remove your hoof." "Cut the shit, slag." Cheap Shot snipped arrogantly. "Can't you see that she's hurt? I bet ya that she's one of the boss's special mares. Good luck telling him you were dumb and you broke her." "You're lucky, pony boy." The abomination snarled. "One day, you won't have to deal to hide behind." He smiled wickedly as he moved his muzzle inches from Cheap Shot. "And then," he dropped his voice into a low whisper, "I'll take my time getting each and every inch of you." "Are we done, slag?" Cheap Shot asked with a yawn. "'Cause I'm kind of hungry, and you're keeping me waiting." With a growl, the abomination raised the pipe from our path, and we continued forward again. I didn't quite understand what happened, but I had a feeling that Cheap Shot would tell me. Knowing that monster by name, having some sort of deal for protection, he certainly had some explaining to do. "Not now." He looked at me with a smirk. "I know you want answers, but you can get them after you eat. Deal?" I didn't know what to think, but I nodded anyway. We continued to walk down the hallway, turning towards the cafeteria I'd gazed into when we first got here. The corpses they'd been cutting up were now nowhere to be seen, and the tables had been wiped clean. Instead, rows of prisoners sat and ate. Most surprising than the cleanliness was the noise. As opposed to the stark silence I'd expected, the room was filled with conversations. "Ugh, Tuesday surprise," Cheap Shot muttered, pulling us in the direction of the cafeteria's serving line. "The trick about it is finding what Tuesday they're scraping it from." He chuckled as he spoke. I think it had been then that I noticed his eyes wandering over the whole room. The fact that he both knew how to turn a conversation around and to survey somewhere so thoroughly told me what he was. Suddenly, the whole arrogant attitude seemed to make sense. "So, how long have you been a thief?" I asked. I slid a dirty-looking tray from a stack and placed it in the line. "My, what keen eyes you have," he answered as he still scanned the room. "I'm good with more than just my hooves, you know. I like to consider myself a stallion of many means." He finally stopped and eyed me with a smirk. "But you know what they say. A rose by any other name, still a thief." I snorted as I hoofed a tray from him onto the line as well. Not the answer I was looking for, but I assume you get it. He sighed and carried us a few steps down the line. "To survive in here, you can't pick and choose. Criticize my skills all you want, but I know who's trustworthy enough to work with." As we slid down the line, I watched as tray after tray of cooked meat was served. I didn't want to think about what I'd seen earlier in here. My thoughts kept drifting to the question of, if this is, will I be forced to eat pony to survive? Sure enough, as we slid up to the window, I received a flat, mostly charred steak. On the unburnt bottom corner of it sat a picture of the top half of a burning barrel. My stomach rebelled, but before I could throw up, Cheap Shot bit down onto the tray. He balanced it on my back and pushed us towards the line. Now, he spoke quietly in my ear. "We need to blend in, right?" He left his tray at the end of the line, and instead helped me to a table. As I sat down, he took the tray and set it in front of himself. "You'll need to eat. I can't have you any weaker than you are," he simply stated at the meal in front of him. It was a sad gaze, full of pain and regret, something I've begun to feel all too often these days. "You might hate doing it, but we do what we must to survive." "How long have you been in here?" I asked. The smell of cooked pony flank hit my nose, and I recoiled. The only thing that kept me from falling to the floor was Cheap Shot. He'd been quick to catch me, but as he set me back upright, he also pushed the tray closer. "I mean it. You need to eat to keep your strength up." He sighed as he looked at me. "No more questions." I just sat and stared at him. How could he expect me to eat what used to be a living, thinking pony? The idea that he'd most likely been doing it to survive disgusted me. At the same time, I knew I had to. I leaned forward on the bench and hovered my muzzle above the pungent steak. If I just ate it quickly, there'd be less time to think about it. I could do this. As I opened my muzzle and the grimy end of the levitating nightstick poked over my shoulder, I looked around the edge of my tray and dragged it towards the end of the table. It hung on the edge for a moment as the tray tilted itself ever so slightly. I looked up to the abomination that was controlling the nightstick, and when I did, it tipped over. The tray and steak tumbled to the floor with a clatter that silenced the cafeteria. "Oops." The abomination smirked as he stared at me. He had been the same abomination I'd seen whose legs were all mismatched. "Looks like you broke the rules by making a mess." He took a step back and controlled his nightstick slowly in his levitation. "Clean it up." Cheap Shot nudged me. When I looked back, he gave a short nod that came with a specific look, one that read, "Do it," to blend in. Carefully, I pushed myself from my seat and hoofed at the tray. I took it in my fetlock and placed it on the floor to push against the steak. It was an attempt to scoop on it, but it failed when the abomination swung his nightstick down and knocked the tray from my hold. "Didn't you hear your friend? You need to eat." The abomination chuckled. "Eating it from the floor is a much more efficient way to clean and to keep your pathetic life for another day." He placed the nightstick on the bench of my head and nudged me towards the grime-coated steak. "You had your fun. Let her be." Sheepstock spoke up. In an instant, I felt the pressure lift from my neck. In the same moment, there was a sharp crack as the abomination hit Cheap Shot. He slumped forward onto the table limply, but the abomination only growled. He raised the nightstick again, but I couldn't let him hurt the only chance I had of getting out of here. Standing up, I put myself between his swing and Cheap Shot. Though my body ached and my stomach churned, the one thing I would not lose is the will to survive. My defiance was short-lived as the abomination brought the nightstick down on my back. I cried out as my rear legs gave out. The nightstick swung down again, this time to my side. The sickening snap and flutter of pain took my breath away. I gasped as I failed to draw breath. My shaking forelegs gave way as he swung again. Just the edge of the stick caught me in the side of the head, and I think I blacked out. For a moment, the world was just ringing and flashing lights. When my vision came back, everything had shifted perspective. My mind felt hazy as I laid on the floor and struggled to reorientate myself. I looked towards the abomination that towered above me, grinning victoriously as he held the stick in his magical levitation. For a moment, his face twisted as if in pain, and to confuse me more, he slumped onto his haunches before falling over. Behind where he'd stood was a well-dressed, normal-looking unicorn. The white suit he wore was positively radiant, not a speck of dirt to be found. He stood with a rigid position that presented strength, and his short green mane read to me that of a mercenary. The unicorn's horn glowed dimly, adding an odd layer of tint to the scratched-up sunglasses that peered down to me with. Slowly, a smile parted his lips as he held his hoof out to me. Tisk, tisk. It seems that not every guard got the memo. His voice was deep, and the way his words rolled off his tongue was too naturally. This stallion showed off twice the arrogance of Cheap Shot, and his words were tainted with privileged tones. Let me apologize for your mistreatment. You are a VIP, after all. He sighed and rolled his hoof impatiently. You know how it is, though. Good help is hard to find nowadays. He reached up and took his hoof in mine. With an effortless yank on his part, he lifted me off the floor. I let out a scream of pain when I felt my side give out in an unnatural tug. The prisoners let out a few hushed gasps as a bit of blood splashed on the pristine suit he wore. His vision dropped as he looked to the floor, and he shook his head ever so slightly. I followed his vision down to see the familiar gray tubes unraveled from his body. Well, that's unfortunate, he said as he let me go. Will one of you take her to the infirmary? We can't have her dying just yet. Without a support, I dropped back down to the floor. As if it needed to be worse, all the pain of my wounds hit me at once, and I lost control of myself. I writhed and screamed in agony, for I didn't know how long before blacking out again. Oh, come on, doll. I hardly even know her. Cheap Shot's voice was far from what I'd wanted to hear when I regained consciousness. Don't do this, May, baby. He may have been speaking the right words, but there wasn't an ounce of sentiment in it. I opened my eye and watched as a unicorn mare across the way rolled her eyes and turned around. Fine, bitch. See if I care when you come crawling back. He spat out as he sat down. A real gentle colt, I see. I coughed out. A whine escaping from my muzzle as even the exertion to talk made my chest hurt. I looked down to find that I had several grimy-looking bandages wrapped around my body to keep me shut. How long was I out? Just a couple of hours. With the beating you took in the cafeteria, I'm surprised you weren't torn in half. Well, you kind of were. He looked at me as he shook his head. That doesn't matter. You all right now? Tell me, what was your plan to escape? Excuse me? I groaned. Oh, don't play coy. He snorted and turned to face me. I've heard stories of you pretty much getting out anything. Every pony knows you're the mayor who gets sought out in these hard contracts alive. Are you telling me that you're saying they're all lies? Well, no. I stammered. I never knew I had any sort of memorable reputation out there, let alone one that makes me sound like some unkillable badass. Fucking assholes make me out to have unfair expectations. So, I ain't wrong in thinking you've got some idea of what to do. He smirked in a way that made me uncomfortable. This place didn't look to be too well guarded on the outside when I arrived, so once we could get out of here, we could probably be home free. The only thing keeping us in were those abominations and the warden, from what I could tell. I had no idea how many abominations there were in here, but as the warden proved, they weren't indestructible. If we could get at least half the prisoners in here to work together, We'd have the advantage in numbers. Only problem was finding enough trustworthy ponies to willingly work together. I might have a way, but it will take time. I stared at him straight in the eyes. You'll have to be patient, and you're going to have to trust me. Whatever you say, I ain't going nowhere. He yawned and leaned back into the bars. So long as we both get out of this place, take all the time you need. With a flop, he dropped himself to the cold concrete floor. Now, if you don't mind, I gotta go get some sleep before tomorrow. Big first day of planning and shit. He waved his hoof around lazily. After only a minute, he was snoring softly. Time was something I wasn't sure I had. I'd been fortunate enough that they'd sewn me up this time, but who's to say they'd be fast enough next time? Cheap Shot better be every bit as charismatic for others as he is egotistical. If the spirits of harmony were right and my friends were coming to save me, then getting out of here in time for their arrival is my priority. A soft beep pinged from my pip buck. With only minor pain, I brought it to my muzzle to see what it was trying to say. As I did, the display in my vision turned blue and Pie fuzzed into existence. She sat curled up in the corner with her muzzle buried under her foreleg. Pie? I whispered out. My eyes looked first to Cheap Shot before I changed focus to making sure the guards weren't walking by. Where have you been? I could have used you back in Dodge. I know. She wailed as I fumbled to turn down the volume. As I scrolled the wheel, her voice dropped enough that I had to pull the pip buck close to listen. I've been a bad sister. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Everything that happened was because of me. You lost your friend because of me. She sniffled. Knowing Pallet was gone, it hurt. It hurt almost as much as the wound in my chest, but I had to keep up hope. The spirits of Harmony, Daddy, and Mommy, they told me that I could help ponies, and that's what I was going to do. Losing Pallet was bad, but if I broke down completely over her, then she would have died in vain. As long as I can get back up, there's hope for others. That's what the spirits reminded me of, and that's what I had to remind Pie of. Yeah, you're right. Pie smiled at me and wiped her cheek. Still, I'm sorry. I can never repay you for the freedom you've given me, and I can never be forgiven for what I've done. She shook her head softly and rubbed at her eyes. I promise, sister, I'll never leave your side. I'll do everything I can to help you fix what I've done. There is more going on than what we both knew. It was as much my fault as it was yours. I don't know why, but I tried to give a comforting smile to Pie. We'll work together, and we'll set things right. Maya shifted to the still slumbering form of Cheap Shot. First, I'll need whatever help you can to get me out of this place. The Pip-Buck has already mapped the entire first and second floor of the building. Pie spoke up in more of a hopeful tone. If you can find a way to get me near the working Spritebot or terminal, I might be able to send out a request to cross-reference this building's layout with the any still available on the data servers. Why do I keep this thing if I keep forgetting I can do it? I didn't expect a get-out-of-jail trump card, but I'd hoped for something that I could at least use. What good would knowing where we are do us? If I can open the building permits, structural blueprints, and maintenance records, I might be able to find a weak point to exploit. As Pie spoke, the different parts of the display in my vision flickered back to pink. And you get the Pip-Buck because I'm here. If I had somewhere else to put you, that we could travel with us, I would. We can talk about that later, though. As long as you need... how long would you need to get all that information? I whispered, eyeing one of the abominations trudging through the cell block, with a bored look across his muzzle. Spritebots were few and far between, but I might be able to find a running terminal somewhere in this place. 5 or 6 minutes at the most. Pie bounced a bit as she spoke. I don't know exactly where there's a usable terminal. My Pip-Buck logged it as available access point earlier. What? I snapped louder than I possibly should have. Then, why did you suggest we find another one? Because that terminal was only in range when you were on the second floor of the building. She trailed off as she finished her sentence. She hung her head as the realization hit me. The only time I'd gone up to the second floor was... But it's fine. She cut my train of thought and stammered her words through a forced smile. We can find another one. Or, like I said, a Spritebot. We can try. Now it was me wearing the forced smile. But keep a low profile until we're alone in a cell like this. If ever a prisoner finds out about you, I don't know what they'd do to either of us. She nodded vigorously. Cross my heart and hope to die. Stick a cupcake in my eye. She smiled and put a hoof to her eye. Then, with a flicker, she disappeared. My Pip-Boy returned to its default green, and I let my hoof slowly slide to my side. I didn't want to go back up to the doctor's level, but I'm sure there would come a time when I'd have to. Pi would have to use that time to our advantage, and with what she found, I'm sure we had real hope of getting out of here. Cheap Shot wouldn't be easy to keep in the dark about Pi, but I don't entirely trust the stallion. Part of me kept up the idea he'd just betray me at the last moment, that once we're home free, he'll try to turn on me. That didn't matter, not yet anyway. Tomorrow we'd have to start to build an alliance, and there were many more ponies in this place that I trust less than him right now. With as much trouble as this would be, my friends better be waiting for me on the other side of these damned walls. I didn't sleep more than a few hours, and when I'd gotten up, it was time to head to the cafeteria. My chest felt painless today for some reason, and I chalked it up to the fact that they probably gave me some potion or something to keep it from happening again. Cheap Shot still helped me to walk, and I used the closeness we had to go over the plan. He hadn't been too happy with the idea of a riot, but he couldn't offer a better suggestion. I stomached as much of the cooked pony meat as I possibly could, to keep up both my strength and appearances of cooperation. Eating another pony was something that I never wanted to do again after today. Not because it was wrong, but because part of me inside registered that it actually passed as tasting all right. When the time to march back to our cells came, Cheap Shot gave me an unsettling smile. All right, you worthless ponies. One of the abominations by the doorway shouted. 1 hour yard time starts now. Enjoy your fresh air while you still draw breath. It's showtime, Cheap Shot told me at a hushed whisper. As I hooked my hoof around him and backed away from the table, he continued. Look, you're gonna need to get tight while I get all the ponies we can trust on our side. I'll bring them to you when I know that they'll work with us. So, you want me to sit and do nothing? I eyed him curiously as we fell into our place in line. I didn't mind so much, seeing as this might be a time for me to look for a roving spybot signal. I hoped that I had avoided the second floor was something that I couldn't let go of. What? Are you kidding? You still need to sort out plenty of the plan. He cocked an eyebrow and widened a smile. You just need to trust old Cheap Shot to do the best that he can do. You dig? Forward we marched, through the halls and back through the cell block, to a set of double doors at the other end. I still couldn't trust Cheap Shot. Not 100%. However, he was right. There was still plenty of work to be done on my end. The doors to outside opened, and we were marching out into a rocky courtyard. Immediately before us was an enormous cliff that rose up the mountain that this prison rested on. The jagged and rocky edges cast shadows in the enormous morning light, but looked almost big enough to hide ponies in. They might be hard to get into, but they could be an option if we needed to hide somewhere quickly. With another look around the yard, I saw the other building in the complex, just as large as this one we'd come from. I wondered if it was just as full as this block had been. All around us stretched a tall chain-link fence, enclosing the yard between a few guard posts that sat at the extreme edges of it. One of the sides offered a fairly good view of the flatlands that ran around the mountain, and I got an idea. I'm going to sit over there and think, I told Cheap Shot, as I removed my hoof from around his neck. Go do your thing. He simply nodded and stepped out of line. Slowly, I walked my way towards the edge of the fence. I looked up to one of the old guard towers, nervously. The closer to the fence I got, the more uneasy he felt. In the interest of not seeming suspicious, I stopped where I was and sat down. In doing so, he seemed to relax before turning his eyes elsewhere. I gave myself a few minutes before I lifted my Pip-Buck up. Pi, I whispered. Are there any sprybots in range? The display shifted to pink as she popped into my vision. Nopey nopey! She spoke in a hushed whisper. Sorry, but you'll have to be patient. Yeah, patient. That's what I was trying not to become. I had been the doctor's patient enough times already. Why can't the great goddesses just grant me just one simple sprite bot? Is that too much to ask? The sound of hooves coming behind me were the only response I received. Well, well, well. This just got interesting. A stallion spoke up. When I tried to turn to face him, a right hook connected my muzzle and I flopped down to the dirt. Remember me, bitch? You gelded me, screwed up my shoulders, and made me look like a fool in front of my own gang. And I'm going to enjoy doing the exact same to you. As he spoke, the stars from my eyes faded away, and I looked up to find that he was indeed the stallion I'd dealt with weeks ago. Well, seeing as I made you a mare, how about we... I tried to be witty, but he wasn't having any of it. To cut me off, he pressed his hoof into my neck and pinned me with his other legs. There you go, running your fucking mouth again. He leaned in close to me with a disgusting grin. He stuck his tongue out and ran it along my neck, making my fur stand on end. I'm going to kill you, but first, I'm going to show you how a real stallion fucks. I wouldn't do that, Jackknife. Cheap Shot called over. The warden doesn't like it when somebody plays with his toys. Fuck off, Cheap Shot. The stallion above me snapped. I pressed his hoof down harder, and I struggled to breathe. This bitch is mine for what she did to me. I'd rather die having had my fun than before. He looked back at me and lowered himself closer. Darkness crawled in my vision as I tried to find the strength to throw him off of me. Before he could continue, the quick beat of hooves filled my ears. With a groan, he was lifted off of me. I gasped for air, turning my head to watch his jackknife tumbled a few feet in the dirt. Above me stood Cheap Shot. His muzzle twitched as he grimaced at the douchebag he'd knocked off at me. I'm serious, Jack. She's under my protection. He spit as Jackknife recovered. The stallion trot forward again, stopping just an inch or so away from Cheap Shot's muzzle. Back the fuck off, Cheap. Your deal means nothing to me. He looked down at me with a smile as it crept back across his muzzle. Besides, you can't watch over her 100% of the time. I wanted to get up, but with them standing so close, I couldn't. Cheap Shot leaned in closer, putting his muzzle right up against Jackknife's ear before whispering to him. As hard as I tried, I couldn't hear what he'd said, but it got Jackknife to take a step back. Are you fucking serious? You expect me to believe that? He scoffed and kicked at the dirt. He paused when all Cheap Shot did was nod. You better be serious, or the both of you are fucking dead. You hear me? He said before he looked down at me and snarled. We aren't through, bitch. You're safe until we get out. But that's it. He turned and walked off after that. I looked at Cheap Shot for answers, and he simply shrugged. He ain't a deal, but you're going to need more support if this is going to work. He sighed and sat down. I don't like the guy either, but beggars can't be choosers. Lucky for us, we got plenty of options. He looked over his shoulder as a pair of identical black mares walked up beside him. Their matching silver eyes and light pink manes looked to be mere reflections of each other. Meet the Ash twins. They control the Dash production and distribution in the Beltamar settlements. Or, at least they used to. We have heard of your reputation, Miss Storm. The one on the right spoke. Breaking out will be no easy task, even for a mare of your talents. The one on the left spoke up without breaking pace with the conversation. All in all, I could tell that they were an eccentric pair right off the bat. I'd never heard of them before, but if they knew me just by reputation, that at least made them more trustworthy than Jackknife. I only ask two things. One, that you keep my identity a secret, and refer to me only as the name Hope. Two, is that once we're out, you go your own way and stay the fuck away from me and my friends. I grumbled as I pulled myself back to my hooves. Unless you're willing to help me kill the asshole who put us in here, I never want to see you again. If you can guarantee us a way out, and the freedom to return home, the one on the left stated this time, then we can accept these terms. The one on the right finished. The way they did that was not only uncanny, but unsettling. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Miss Hope. She spoke softly with a small nod. As her and her sister turned around, she kept her eyes on me just long enough to offer a blush and a wink. Well, that went well. Cheap Shot chuckled and pat me on the shoulder. Looks like he even got an admirer. Don't assume that, as their word means little to me. Hell, we're not even the good of friends yet, Cheap Shot. I shot him a glance that I'd hoped would tell him how serious I was. 3 allies in 10 minutes is good. Now, show me what you can do with 50 more. I need quiet to plan. Sure. He shook his head with a smirk. But you really gotta learn to loosen up a bit. He turned and started trotting away. Maybe learn to smile, even. I chortled and smirked at that. Idiot. Chapter end. Only an idiot thinks their plan is foolproof. Quest finished. Penitentiary of the Damned. Quest started. Jailbreak. Levels earned none. Perks earned none.